Lesson 27, accessing your API from your application. In this lesson, you change the way that you access JSON formatted data by adding an API namespace. Then you modify your Ajax function to allow users to join courses directly from a model. Last, you create the action to link users and courses through a new route. This lesson covers creating an API namespace, building a UI model to fetch data asynchronously, connecting models with MongoDB methods. I discussed namespace in lesson 26. Now you're going to implement a namespace for API endpoints that return JSON data perform actions asynchronously. To get started, create a new API module called API routing.js in your routes folder. This module will contain all the API routes with JSON response bodies. Require these new models in index.js by adding cost API routes, then tell your router to use the model under the API namespace with router.use. Listing 27.1, adding a route to show all courses in API routes.js. So we start off by importing our required modules, which is Express, and then we require the course controller. With router.get, we define with router.get courses course controller, we define a route for handling the get requests to courses. So basically, when a get request is made to courses, it will go through course controller.index, which is our middleware function. Then it will pass to course controller.respond JSON. So what the index does, it fetches the list of courses. It fetches the list of courses, and then respond JSON function will send the JSON to the client. And then with router.use controller.error.json, this is set up for our error handling. So it's our error handling middleware. And then with module.export equals to router, what we're doing is we're exporting our router. So listing 27.1, basically what it does is it handles the routes for courses and JSON responses, and also handling errors. Listing 27.2, adding JSON responses for courses and course controller. So our function respond JSON. So what it does is handles the request from previous middleware, and it submits a response. So this middleware respond JSON is responsible for sending a JSON response with data stored in rest.locals. So it sends the response from the data in rest.locals, and then it also has a HTTP status code. So this HTTP status code, what it does is it indicates success when responding. It indicates success when responding with the JSON. With error.json, it will respond with the 500 status code and error message in JSON format. So it handles our errors. And creates an error object. And that error object is sent as a JSON response. So if an error is passed it will include an error message in the response. It will include an error message in the response. If not, it will send the error. It will send a message with unknown error. So if the error is not a 500 status code, an internal server error, it will send a message for unknown error. So with this new API namespace, route and control action in place, change the Ajax GET request in recipe app to call API courses instead of courses format JSON. Then remove the conditional block, checking for the format query param in your courses index view action. Restart your application, check whether you can still load the course data in the model. Also, because you are now returning your data wrapped in another JavaScript object containing your status code, you need to modify your Ajax to call your Ajax call to handle return data properly. Change the Ajax call in recipe.js as shown in the next listing. So we start off by setting up a local variable to represent data, and then we check that the data object contains course information. Then we look through the course data and add elements to the model. So basically, our .get API courses sends an Ajax request to the route endpoint and expects a JSON data in response. Let data equals to results.data checks if data and data.courses are true. So let data equals to results.data checks if the data and data data.courses are true. If not, it will stop the processing. We then populate the HTML elements. If the response contains valid data, the code will iterate through each course. So that's where data.courses for each courses. So it will iterate through each course. It will then append for each course a new div elements, HTML div elements with the class model body will be created. Each div contains a span. With the course title, it contains a span with the class course title that displays the course title value, and then with the course description, it will display the course description value. In the next section, you add more functionality to the model to allow users to join courses. Joining courses via model. Listing the courses in the model is a great accomplishment. In this section, you improve the model even more by allowing users to join a course asynchronously through the model. Add a button that allows users to join the course. Through Ajax, you submit a request to an API endpoint. Where a control action attempts to add the user to the course and responds with a success or failure message in JSON. So listing 27.4, we are adding a button. We are adding a join button to course in a recipe. So we basically add a button with the target class join to join a course. That's listing 27.4. To get these buttons to work, change the code in recipe app.js to use the code in listing 27.5. In this example, you create a function called add join button listener that sets up a click event listener for each button with the class join button. You need to call this function right after the AJAX request completes because you want to attach the listener to the buttons after they are created on the page. To do this, append and then block. To do this, append and then block to the AJAX request. The route and action that handle the request return the JSON value success. The value success true if you are able to add the user to the course. If you are successful, change the text and color of the button to indicate that the user has joined by adding a new join button class and removing the old join button class. This swapping of classes allows you to style each button with different style rules in recipe app.css, and also prevents the click event from triggering another request. If you do not see the color of the button change, make sure that you're targeting the correct button class if joining course results in an error. Change the button text to tell the user to try again. Okay. Listing 27.5, adding an event listener to each button in recipe app. So document.ready, what it does is it ensures that the code is executed only after our document object model has loaded. And then our model button.click so when the element with the ID model button is clicked, this click event handler is triggered. Then the code will do, it will empty the HTML content to clear previous content. And then our .get API courses what it does is it performs an AJAX get request performs the get request to our route API /courses, the API /courses endpoint to retrieve the course data, and then the data will be the response data will be in JSON. Let data equals to results data. It processes the data from our AJAX request, and then it checks if the response contains data and data.courses. If the response has our course information, it will iterate through each course and build the HTML elements for each, including our join button. And then with our add.join event listener, we call the add join button listener to add an event listener on our button after the AJAX request is complete. Let add join button listener So what it does is it adds a event listener to all the elements with the class join button. So when the button is clicked, it sends another Ajax get request to join the courses. And then with the let button, what it does is it extracts the course ID. So it will extract the course ID and send an Ajax request to API/courses. So it gets the course ID and then sends an Ajax request. And then we check whether the join action was successful, and then it will modify the button based on whether the user has joined or needs to join. Creating an API endpoint to connect models. To complete the course model, you need to create a route to handle requests made for the current user. So in this join action, you get the current logged in user and the course's ID from the URL params. If a current user exists, use the Mongoose find by ID and update to locate the user object and update its courses array to contain the target course ID. Here you use the MongoDB add to set method, which ensures that the array has no duplicate IDs. If you are successful, add a success property to the response local object, which in turn is passed to response.json and passed back to the client. In case the user isn't logged in or an error occurs, while updating the user's association, pass an error to be handled by your error handling middleware. So we add the join with creating an action to join a course in course controller.js. With the join, we added the join action to let the users join the course. So let course ID goes to required params.id. It extracts the course ID from our request params. It also retrieves the current user object. It retrieves the current user object from our request.user. And then if current user.find by update and update, it checks if there is a current user that is logged in. So if our user is logged in, it will go to the next step of our join process. And then if there is no user logged in, it will call the next function with an error indicating that our user must be logged in before joining our courses. If the user is logged in, it updates that user's document in the database. So it does that. It does an update by using our model user.find by ID and update. If our update is successful, it will set the success property in res.locals. It will set it to true, and then it will call for the next middleware function. If there is any error, it will send the error user must log in before joining any course. If this action in place restart your application and try joining courses in the model. If you're not signed in, you may see the try again text appear over the button. Otherwise, depending on your custom styling, your button should turn green and change text for every button you click, as shown in figure 27.2. Adding an action to filter courses in CoursesController.js. So we check if our current user is logged in. So let current user equals to respond locals current user. What it does is it retrieves the current user object from the rest.locals user. If current user, it will check if the user is logged in, and then it will filter and map. It will filter and map the courses. With let map equals to rest.locals courses.map, what happens with this basically block of code is it checks if the user is logged in, and then if the user is logged in, it will map the rest.locals.courses to map courses. And then in that case, for each of the courses in our rest.locals, it checks if the current user has joined the course based off the course ID in the current user.courses. So it checks if the user has joined any course using the specific course's course ID. And then from there it will create an object for each course using object.assign. And then with our rest.locals.courses equals to mapped courses. So what happens and then is after our query has mapped the rest.locals, it updates it with our new mapped courses. So it will update the courses. So this mapped courses will contain course information about whether each courses was joined by the user. The last step is changing the client-side JavaScript in recipe app.js to check whether the current user has already joined the course and modifying the button in the course listing model. In listing 27.8, you use a ternary operator in the buttons class attribute and main text content. These operators check whether the course data join property is true or false. If the property is true, create the button to indicate that the user has already joined. Otherwise, display a button inviting users to join. So our dynamic button has a class for each button. And the class is set based on the value of courses.joined. If the user has joined a course, it will assign the join button, and then if the user has not joined a course, it will assign the join button to that user. And then our data ID, what it does is it stores our course IDs. So in this lesson, you learn how to modify your namespacing structure to accommodate an APF or JSON data responses. You also improved your course model by allowing users to join specific courses without needing to change pages. Through the AJAX requests and API endpoints you created, more of your application's functionality can move to a single page and away from individual views for each section. In lesson 28, I discussed some ways in which you can secure your API.